Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the talk you can see on the screen that I'm going to give. Disaster at Isandlwana, and I agree, it's quite a mouthful, and sometimes they put an H in the middle, but I've kept it simple, and it's Isandlwana. Now, what happened at Isandlwana, this remote and forbidding rocky hill, which you can see there? What happened rocked Victorian Britain and the British Empire, and it severely dented the reputation of the British Army. It was one of Britain's most serious military disasters. And of course, for the soldiers and the supporting civilians of the British Empire who were there, it must have been the most appalling, terrifying, and in most cases fatal experience. But before I describe the events at Isandlwana in January 1879, I first need to take you back a century and a half to the 1870s to understand the situation in South Africa and the origins of the war against the Zulus. Essentially, the origins of the war with the Zulus lie in the violent, turbulent relationships between the white European settlers and the indigenous native population. You see, there were 5 old European white settler states. There was Cape Colony, Natal, Griqualand West, the Orange Free State, and the Transvaal. And the last 2, the Orange Free State and the Transvaal, were Boer states. That is to say, they were originally settled by the Dutch, the Boers, whose white populations had been displaced out of the Cape area in the south, and they'd been displaced north by the influx of British settlers. In fact, South Africa at this time, I stress, was a confederation of these 5 largely self-governing settler states under overall sovereignty from Britain. It wasn't a unified country at this time. Importantly, it was fast emerging as Britain's wealthiest colony. It also possessed enormous strategic importance because it dominated the sea routes around Africa to the Far East. Well, the discovery of diamonds led to the establishment of diamond mines, which in turn sucked in vast numbers of natives seeking paid employments as laborers, and this in turn led to the gradual disintegration of many of the traditional tribal hierarchies and tribal society. The diamond rush also served to place strains on the relationship of the white settlers to each other and to the Crown. In 1877, Britain annexed the Transvaal because the Transvaal had become bankrupt, and this led to a rapid decline in the relationship between the British authorities and the Zulus. You see, the Boers in the Transvaal and the Zulus hated each other, and on that great old principle of my enemy's enemy is my friend, the Zulus were therefore on good terms with the British settlers of Natal, who they regarded as a balance against the Boers of Transvaal. But once Transvaal was annexed to the empire, this natural balance began to evaporate. Well, the British High Commissioner in South Africa, you can see there, Sir Henry Bartle Frere, he believed that the Zulus intended, sooner or later, to invade British settler territory, and he began to cast around for a pretext for a preemptive strike. Why was Frere so concerned about the Zulus? Well, with traditional tribal hierarchies disappearing all over southern Africa, the Zulus remained a unified and deeply traditional people with a strong warrior culture. Young Zulus all had to serve in impis, that's regiments, and they weren't allowed to marry until they had proven themselves in war. They possessed an extraordinary ability to cover long distances at great speed by employing a loping trot. The Zulu army was extremely efficient and it was ruthlessly disciplined. Their traditional form of attack involved a strategy that they called the bull, and that's whereby the horns of the bull spread out to the flanks to surround an enemy, and then they crushed him back against the chest of the bull. Now, in fact, Sir Henry Bartle Frere was almost certainly wrong about the Zulus' intentions. The Zulu king, Cetshwayo, sometimes written as Setiwayo, but I'll call him Cetshwayo, almost certainly wished to retain good relations with Britain. Inevitably, there had been irritating minor incidents along the Natal and Zululand border, and while Cetshwayo's reaction was sustained and confrontation averse, Frere was determined to strike. He resolved to teach Cetshwayo a lesson, and he wrote to London asking for additional troops in which to attack Zululand, but without waiting for a reply, on the 11th of December 1878, he dispatched a 20-day ultimatum to the Zulus. Cetshwayo agreed to pay a fine of 500 cattle, but he refused to disband the Zulu army. And that disbanding of the Zulu army was what was one of Frere's demands. Now, Frere clearly didn't expect that part of the ultimatum to be met, since disbandment of the Zulu army was obviously unthinkable for any Zulu. On the 6th of January 1879, under the command of Lieutenant General the Lord Chelmsford, some 6,000 British regular troops and volunteers from the rest of the colony, plus 9,000 native levies, together with 20 field artillery guns and 10 rocket launchers, invaded Zululand in 3 columns. Chelmsford's plan was for the 3 columns, which you can see there, to converge on Ulundi, Cetshwayo's capital, which you can see outlined in green in the middle of the picture. Chelmsford has been described as experienced but pedestrian, and events were to show that he underestimated his enemy. Well, the central of the 3 columns was led by Chelmsford himself, and it consisted of the 1st and 2nd battalions of the 24th Regiment. Now, that was regular British Army infantry. It also consisted of a battery of 6 7-pounder field guns. There was some mounted infantry who were local volunteers. There were some engineers, and there were 2 battalions of native infantry. And this came to a total of 4,700 men, of whom 1,852 were Europeans. Well, this force crossed the Buffalo River at Rorke's Drift on the 20th of January, and 1 company of the 24th Regiment was left behind to guard the crossing. And of course, they were to later on gain undying fame for their defense of Rorke's Drift. Also left behind at Rorke's Drift was another of the 3 columns, and that one was under the command of this chap, Colonel Anthony Dunford, who had 300 mounted Basuto levies, that's local troops, plus a rocket detachment and several NNC companies, that's Natal Native Contingent companies. Well, the roads were poor and Chelmsford's progress was slow at first because it was governed by the speed of the teams of oxen pulling the hundreds of carts with the column's tentage, supplies, and ammunition. After advancing 10 miles from Rorke's Drift, Lord Chelmsford decided to set up camp beneath Isandlwana. Now, this rocky hill has a very distinctive shape. It's always reminded me of an Egyptian sphinx or possibly of a lion lying down. But the translation of the name from Zulu comes out as clenched fist. And here we begin to see some confusion in the chain of command of Chelmsford's column. Chelmsford was a general, and he should have confined himself to overall strategy, leaving his subordinates to deal with the more mundane matters. And yet he dabbled in every minute aspect of the column to the extent that where he assumed subordinates were dealing with problems and matters, they assumed that the general was. Chelmsford's own standing orders required that whenever a unit stopped, its wagons should be drawn up in a laager or liga. And there you can see there. And that's what you did when you set up a tented camp so that you could use the wagons as part of the defense. Unfortunately, at Isandlwana, he didn't order this, and neither did he order a lookout to be placed on the top of Isandlwana Hill, nor did he order any pickets to be put out a few miles away on distant hilltops. Early on the morning of the next day, that's 21st of January, Chelmsford sent out a strong patrol of 150 men of the Natal Mounted Police. That's an efficient and reliable body, and they were under the command of a white officer, Major John Dartnell. This force was sent out to carry out a reconnaissance, a recce of a Zulu chieftain's kraal, which was known to be about 12 miles to the southeast. A little later, Chelmsford decided to send out two battalions of native infantry as reinforcements, which brought up the strength of that column to about 1,600 men. In the afternoon, a messenger appeared from Major Dartnell and stated that he had been in contact with some Zulus and that that contact was over and he would now bivouac for the night, and he requested a reinforcement by 2 companies of the regular 24th Regiment. And he wanted this so that at dawn he could carry out an attack on the Zulus. Chelmsford was furious because he had expressly told Dartnell not to stay out overnight, and he refused to send reinforcements, but he did send blankets and food. Then at 1:30 in the morning, another messenger arrived from Dartnell, and that messenger had got lost on the way, so his message was several hours late. And he brought the message that Dartnell believed that he was in proximity to a force of some 2,000 Zulus. Well, that was enough to make Chelmsford believe that here was an opportunity to inflict a decisive defeat on the Zulus. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, he gave orders for a march at first light by the whole of the 2nd Battalion of the 24th Regiment, less one company who would stay behind at Isandlwana, plus 4 of the 6 artillery guns and that group would march to support Major Dartnell. Nominally in command of the force was Colonel Glynn, who was the commanding officer of the 2nd Battalion of the 24th of Foot. But General Chelmsford and his staff went with the column, and he continued to meddle in the detail of the movement of the column. Chelmsford also sent a messenger back to Rorke's Drift, ordering Colonel Durnford to move up from Rorke's Drift to Isandlwana. But he failed to give Colonel Durnford any orders as to what he should do when he got to Isandlwana, and we'll come to that later. Well, when Colonel Glynn's force, largely the 2nd Battalion of the 24th Regiment, when they left, it was about 4:30 in the morning. And this chap was left in command at Isandlwana, Lieutenant Colonel Henry Pullein, the commanding officer of the 1st Battalion. The orders that were given to Pullein, and although he didn't know it, similarly, the orders given to Durnford did not actually specify which of the two was to be in overall command once Colonel Durnford and his party arrived at Isandlwana from Rorke's Drift. Technically, Durnford was senior, but the men under his command, who were all on horseback, were not British regulars, and Pullein had been told that he was in command of the camp, and this led to both men acting independently of each other. Meanwhile, Chelmsford's force linked up with Major Dartnell, and what they discovered was that Major Dartnell was not under any great threat, and in fact, no Zulus could be found anywhere near Dartnell. Well, Chelmsford therefore halted at 9:30 for breakfast, and at 10 o'clock, a messenger arrived from Colonel Pullein, who was, of course, back at Isandlwana. Now, the message that the messenger bore was timed at 08:05, so it had been sent at 8:05 in the morning, and it stated that Zulus were, and I quote, advancing in force from left front of camp, unquote. Chelmsford was puzzled by this, and so he sent his naval liaison officer up to the top of a hill with a telescope, but the officer wasn't able to distinguish what was going on, and so Chelmsford resumed his march towards a new campsite, and from there he would await Colonel Pullein, who had been ordered to pack up Isandlwana camp and follow Chelmsford, and so eventually Chelmsford's whole force would be reunited. Now, from a psychological angle, it seems that Chelmsford was determined to press on, and he was inclined to dismiss any reports of a Zulu attack on the camp. He probably regarded that as an annoying distraction from his plans, and probably certainly exaggerated by Colonel Pullein back at the camp. Well, later that morning, Chelmsford received another messenger. This time it came from the commanding officer of a Natal native contingent battalion. That battalion had been ordered back to the camp earlier in the day by Lord Chelmsford because he wanted it to assist Colonel Pullein and his battalion in packing up the camp so that they could march and join Lord Chelmsford. Well, on their way towards Isandlwana, that unit, this Natal native contingent battalion, had captured a Zulu, and that Zulu revealed that there were 12 Zulu impis, or regiments, in the area. The Natal native contingent troops immediately refused to move forward. And so the commanding officer himself rode to within 4 miles of Isandlwana camp, and he witnessed vast hordes of Zulus sweeping down on it. He rode back to his men and he sent messengers to Lord Chelmsford. Chelmsford even dismissed these messengers as almost certainly exaggerated. But he must have begun to have his doubts, because he decided to go and see for himself, and he set out at 2 p.m. with an escort and rode towards Isandlwana. 5 miles from Isandlwana camp, he was met by a Captain Lonsdale, who was able to confirm to Chelmsford's horror and disbelief that the camp had been overrun. Some 1,300 British Imperial troops had been slaughtered, half of them regular British Army. Well, how on earth could this have happened?